Good evening. Welcome to the 2019 edition of the Summer School in Global Studies and Critical Theory, promoted by the Academy of Global Language and Critical Theory. I've joined Bologna, Duke University, and the University of Virginia. This is the 5th edition of the Summer School, hosted in Bologna. During the years, the summer school has more and more rooted itself in the life of the cities, and in particular through the cooperation with the Fondazione Gramsci, and starting from this year with the Foundation of Urban Innovation, we have organized also a series of public events open to the city, so that the connection between the classes and the participation of the international students can interact more directly with the city. There are several other partners in this project, in particular the municipality of Bologna, the anche and other partners. So I want to thank all the people that have contributed to this project and the organization of this edition. This year, the summer school will discuss and approach topic that we have defined as planetary urbanscapes. So the idea is to revisit early 21st century urban landscapes in light of major shift and transformation that are investing the contemporary moment. The idea is that today cities are not only a distinctive type of settlement, but a complex of translocality, a junction of multiple specialities, and a space of experimentation of new forms of governance, power relations, but also structures when alternatives to the contemporary situation can emerge. So we look at cities both as the space where neoliberal logics become more evident, embodied in the daily life of human beings, but also the site of possible resistance to these same logics, and spaces for the imagination of different forms of life. That's the reason why we are particularly happy and honored to open this edition of the summer school with Saskia Sassen, professor of sociology at Columbia University and at the London School of Economics. She does not deserve a long presentation introduction. Just I want to mention the fact that for all those people in the last 30 years, her research has shaped our understanding of the radical transformation of global politics and global economy, and with a peculiar attention on the role of cities in this process of transformation in works such as losing control, territorial authority and rights, and of course what is now kind of classics to global cities. But at the same time, this attention on an analysis of this transformation had always been accompanied by a peculiar attention to human and social effects of this transformation, and with a particular attention for those categories of people that are mostly affected, such as migrants or aliens, who are those, to quote one or another of his books, that are most exposed to the brutality and complexity of global economy. Tonight, she will give us a talk on the rise of predatory information, a topic which is strictly connected with all his research trajectories. So I ask Saskia to come here. Thank you again for being with us.
It's a great pleasure for me to be here. I thank those who invited me. I'm delighted to see all of you here. I don't expect to get to know you all, but it's nice. It's a nice vista. And I always love coming to Italy. Italy has very special knowledge, traditions. My family lived in Italy for about 15 years. So I do understand a bit the Italian. L'italiano lo parlo un po', si vede con un accento argentino, ma credo che si mi entiende. Eso fue castellano, sì. Per clarificare la cosa. I'm going to speak in English, though my natural inclination would be actually to try my Italian on you, but you're lucky that I'm not allowed to do that. What I want to talk about are sort of a couple of issues. One of them is how do we begin to construct categories of analysis that allow us to understand some of the emergent conditions. And what I'm thinking of is that our old categories still serve us well, but we need something else as well. Why? Because some of these silos, these knowledge silos, are breaking apart. There is bleeding, transversal bleeding. How do we then begin to invent a language that allows us to capture a moment of decay when it comes to the existing categories of analysis, which were developed like 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So I use the term decay so as to make sure that you understand that I'm talking about something that is not necessarily a positive, but a negative. That we need to develop other languages, we need a few other categories for analysis, etc., etc. We can work with what we have, but it is sort of bleeding transversely. So how do we begin to think about our current condition by bringing in this transversality rather than the specialized knowledge silos? That is sort of one way of putting it. One way of naming what I do is to say that this is the zone, and I love this language, before method. Not in the zone of method, but before method. I have to turn around because, I don't oh, I can see from there, right? So, and other elements that we can use, the fuzzy edges of paradigmatic knowledge, not the heart of the paradigm, which is still strong and it sort of has its own edifice and its own walls that protect it, but actually the fuzzy edges of the paradigm, where the paradigm isn't quite so strong, where it's weak, but it's open also to other elements moving in, so to say. One language that I like to use is a language of analytic tactics, or a tactical analytics. Since English is not my main language, I never know what sounds better from those two, but I like both. And so maybe some of you Brits who are from English here, you can tell me afterwards what is the better language. Now here are some of these analytic tactics. One is, as I already said, in a way the need to actively destabilize meanings that are now stable. When we speak about the city, the middle classes, the whatever, all of these, it seems to me, certainly in the global north, I don't know about the global south, but it seems to me that certainly in sort of the global north, they're a bit unstable. They don't quite capture what they used to capture. Second element here, in the shadows of powerful explanation. A powerful explanation is like a light that blinds you. You can't see. It's so powerful, oh my God, you can't see. So there, in the shadows, the weak zone, where you can see. You see a fragment, but you can see something. And so I'm interested in that zone. The edges, if you want, of the paradigm. Now, a category that for me always has been very, very important, very useful, very compelling, and I don't know why, but there it is the territorial. The materiality of the territorial and the multiple materialities that we have invented, we have constructed, we have made about the territorial. And I like the language of the territorial rather than the territory. So I'm trying to extricate the category territory from the homes that it has. Our world is full of homes for territories, all these countries. That is one way of thinking. So how do we exit that? That's such a dominant image that the challenge is, how can I think the territorial, but not the territorial as national sovereign territory, something else, something that exists also outside. And so one way, for instance, in which I like to think about this stuff is I would argue that the financial system as a material condition, a lot of buildings, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of capacity to install itself wherever it wants or needs to be. That is an interesting territory. So all these major financial centers across the world actually have constituted a partial territory that moves across many so-called, barriers or whatever from country to country. And it's very narrow. It's just part. And by the way, as a footnote, though I will return to this, to me it seems emblematic. This is emblematic of how the territorial is functioning for powerful actors. It could be high finance, but it could also be other mining operations, land grabbing operations, all of that. It creates particular territorialities. Some are quite negative, actually. And so the territorial has become a tool for a diversity of powerful actors who know what they want out of it. The average citizen is sort of left, where am I? Because it's not their project, it's something else. So we are sort of left with the remainders, almost exaggerated, really. This has nothing of remainder, But we, in a way, the territorial is being grabbed for particular functions in particular ways. It's very partial, it's not national sovereign territory. We, the citizens, are told about national sovereign territory. But when you begin to ask, where is our territory? I don't know. I look at our major cities, they're dominated by enormously powerful actors, high finance, big corporations, luxury this and luxury that, etc., etc. So a whole range of elements. The question of expulsions. I've used that term, and it's the title of one of my books. I've used that term to get at something that happens inside a system. Not expulsion as irregular migrant is expelled. No. Inside. Expulsions. Proper families, so to say, who have lived in a country for centuries or whatever, expelled. There's a lot of expelling that is happening. That has nothing to do with interstate borders. It has to do with how the territorial condition is managed, is developed, is regulated. We have to be on alert for that. All kinds of models that you know from, the models middle class are losing ground. They can no longer be in the urban territories where they used to live. They're out, gone, replaced by something else that has more power. So when we think about the territorial, I think what matters is not so much the whole concept of sovereign territory, as rather who are the core actors who are recomposing, redefining the territory. I think the time will come, and I sense it's really in a place like the United States, the time will come when we have to recover the territorial, but not as a national state sort of thingy, but as the right to inhabit to make, to construct what we want. And it's sort of difficult to think about that, but I see, you know, okay, I go digging and I find all kinds of little elements, you know, but that signal, the transformation that we haven't quite, I think, taken in or understood. Now, finally, the making of it all. And by that I mean, it's a particular vector for analyzing, where rather than sort of looking at it, the condition, you actually try to understand what are the constitutive elements, how come it happened, what was necessary for that X, that Y, to arise, to exist. Ha scritto che mi capisce che quelli che sono italiani, mi capite come parlo questo inglese mio che ha un accento un po' strano, si capisce? Ok, molto bene, grazie. Io preferirei parlarvi in italiano, devo dire. So, intermediation. I think that one of the core functions or capabilities that is enabling this landscape that I'm describing to you has to do with intermediation. Now, it's actually an English term, okay? It doesn't get used very much generally. But intermediation is what it signals, that it happens in between. And that in between often remains nameless. It doesn't get a name. It doesn't get even recognition. So one of my obsessions has been to sort of begin to understand when I use the lens of intermediation. So intermediate, neither here nor there. What am I actually going to see? What can I see? What can I understand? Etc., etc. Now here are a few, I'm a lot of trouble reading this. So one instance in its digest formulation is the global city as an extreme intermediate function. When I developed this notion of the global city, I was never thinking of the city in its full materiality. It was a function of power that was merging. We're going back to the 1980s. So, for me, the global city function is a very partial element, but it is one that allows you to see certain things. And I find that in the current period, it sort of becomes once again rather significant. It has to do with a variety of actors, very significant actors, that require state-of-the-art operational space that has everything they need. Top-level, communicative, digital, believe me, it is not in the interstellar, it's fiber optic. High finance doesn't deal with it. That is for us. It breaks down, it's not totally safe or secure. No, we're talking stuff that is underground. Incredible materiality. And I invite you for a minute, because many people never focus on this, I think. I invite you to think, those cables that the financial sector uses, they have to be laid at the bottom of oceans. I mean, it's an extraordinary event. And as they call it, pulling cable. And I have always wanted to have one of my doctoral students write a dissertation about what it meant to build this infrastructure. Incredibly expensive, incredible challenges, incredibly difficult to do. And it serves mostly, not us. This is for very special sectors. It's a whole other world of communication. And finance is, of course, the queen of the domain here. Point 3 here. I insist that the strategic space includes the households of high-level employees. In other words, what I'm trying to say here is that there is a whole operational space which includes the homes of the high level. It's not just the workplace, it's the homes. Those homes have to work like clockwork. Everything has to go exactly. I'm talking about very high level sort of financial and other types that are delivering, that are creating the algorithms, that are delivering all the kind of machinery and forms of knowledge and instruments that we need in this apparatus that I'm trying to capture for you, which, and I love this, needs a territorial moment, space, materiality is part of the story. It's not all digital. And so I'm very interested in recovering those particular aspects. Now, also finally, final point, so there is no such thing as one global city. It's a whole set of cities, and again, it's not a whole city. It's a way of naming it. It's a way of naming these capabilities that I have been describing. It's about power. Now, the irony is that other dimensions also come in. Human rights activists can benefit from it. You know, all kinds of other, but at the core of it is something that is a bit, let's say, frightening, not so nice. Now, two key features in today's Western economies, in my take. So, one is the question of intermediation. I don't know if that term is familiar to you, but let me sort of try to describe it very briefly. It's a core function for all the high-level sectors. And it has to do with the fact that all the core high sectors are completely, and this is a point that is never mentioned and that I think is incredibly important, all those high core sectors that are so powerful, so rich, they can do whatever they want, buy the technologies they want. That core sector needs some very basic materialities, stuff. So it's not all there, it's also, and once you begin to look at it that way, you also see the fragilities, the needs, why it needs X, Y, Z, B. It's not just the fantastic instruments that high finance has developed. It's not just the extraordinary digital capabilities that are in play. It's all kinds of other things. And that is, it seems to me, something that we need to recover when we analyze power in our cities today. So, those people, they need, no matter how powerful they are, they need to go to the toilet. They can get constipated and have a very hard time on those toilets. They have to clean their teeth, etc. You get the picture, right? Bring that all in. And you begin to detect the fragilities. You begin to make clear the needs that they have of others to help them with this, to help them with that. You destabilize a category that has become far too powerful, which is power. When we speak about power as a category, no, let's unsettle it. What is it? What is it? Why just look at the effect of power, which is what we do now? No. All those other things. So that top level, whatever, in some big bag, is constipated, cannot shit. That's part of the story. They need the cleaning woman to take care of the vomiting that happened from the babies, or whatever. So, you know, when you begin to actually, what is it that all is in play when we talk about power or the powerful? There is a lot of other stuff. You can break it down, bring it down, you know, just that kind of a motion, if you want. Now, that second point there, the financializing of it all, I can really totally, from brilliant innovations requiring algorithmic math to, did you say potatoes? Potatoes. So again here, you know, algorithmic math is also being used in high finance to deal with potatoes. It's not all just the algorithms. Why? Because that is precisely the power of this algorithmic mathematical practice that we have now, which is that you can extract value from anything. And I swear as our destruction of the environment advances, cockroaches, whatever it will be served to feed your poor workers or your rich whatever. A lot of the stuff that now we never see, we talk about power, we talk about this or that, we never see it. No, we have to bring all of that stuff in. Okay. Now here I want to start entering this system that I'm trying to describe to you in terms in which it is usually not described. And so here I want to, do I have a mic? So I want to invite you to look at this, let's see if I can, to look at this curve. It starts in 201 with less than a trillion, right? And 6 years later, oh, look at that, 62 trillion. And that is just 10% of the total value that high finance achieved if I would have taken all of it. This is just one little portion. Now, as you know, the global GDP of all the countries in the world doesn't even approximate that. I mean, this is an extraordinary figure. And again, there you have only the 10%, right? So the question then becomes, what are the types of instruments that we are developing, which are really achieving valorization? They are completely in a new world. It's a new range of capabilities. Now, whether they are good or bad, you know, they are mostly not so good, I would say. Now here is second element. I'm just now putting elements of how the system works, okay? So here's the second one. I don't know if people can see that title. Dark pools in finance. Dark pools, okay? That sounds like dark. That is not my language. That was the language of the head of the Federal Reserve in the United States, who at one point says, when he tries to share with all the people that he has to talk to, he's accountable to, and he says, we have this, and this is good, and this is bad, and then we have dark pools in finance. I mean, dark pools in finance? Language used by the head of the Federal Reserve? Moreover, he was a professor, he was not one of these Trump types. He was an actual professor at Princeton University. I don't know if people can understand how strange that language is. But he said, the truth is, as he talked to all the media, you know, that happens regularly when the head of the Federal Reserve, central bank in the United States, has to address the journalists, etc. And he said, look, we don't know what's happening in those dark pools. Now, he's the head of the financial system, and he doesn't know. And so the question is, how come he doesn't know? And this guy, you know, he was straightforward. He said, look, I don't know, but there are dark pools in finance. We don't know what's happening. And it accounts for more and more of financial operations. Now, I don't know if people get a sense here, but it's absolutely unusual language in an extreme situation. And so he went on to say, you know, these dark pools in finance are basically private networks run by some of the big financial banks, and they get all kinds of bankers, etc., to put their money there. Rather than putting it, say, in the stock market or whatever is the domain of finance that we, the citizens, have access to, can engage with, etc., etc. So it's a whole separate world. And when the head of the Federal Reserve, in other words, the top financial person in the country, I don't know how you say that in Spanish. Do you know? ¿Alguien sabe? ¿Cuál sabe? The head of the, top person, whatever has to do with finance in the country. You have one too in Italy, let me assure you. And then he goes on to say that Europe,
See the gray thing is there? Can people see this or not? The gray, the short little gray, that's Europe. And so the big dark, and see how it went growing, growing, growing. And the head of the Fed, the Federal Reserve, also said, as I already mentioned, we don't know what's happening, but there are more and more of them, and that's where the money is made. Now, to give an extreme image, and I repeat image, you and I, we can go to the stock market. You know the stock market, come si dice in italiano, stock market? Il mercato, But the big guys, they don't go to the stock market. They go to the dog poop. Now, this is it's like a kind of huge robbery. You know, they're taking the valuable stuff, they grab it. Now, the United States is an extreme case. One elegant way of putting it is to say it's the vanguard, it's la vanguardia. Problematic vanguardia, clearly. This, I just wanted to give you these elements to signal that, and there is one more item that I want to mention, to signal that we are dealing today. This is a story that really begins after the 2008 crises that hit also European countries, 2008. That is extremely problematic, and it explains a bit, not completely, the impoverishment also of the middle classes. Because options that the middle classes used to have, you know, this traditional banking and saving, no, that's not where the action is. So these are all, and I'm talking especially about conditions and actors that are not much talked about, you know, that the experts, yes, but not the general public. Oh God, can people see this at all? Yes. You can? Oh, great. So now switching to another condition that feeds in a way that is yet another feeder into this modality that I'm trying to describe to you. So here, look at this title, okay? Ratio of household credit. Credit always sounds good, eh? It's debt. Let's be clear. Credit is debt.
Good evening. Welcome to the 2019 edition of the Summer School in Global Studies and Critical Theory, promoted by the Academy of Global Language and Critical Theory, joined by Bologna, Duke University, and the University of Virginia. This is the 5th edition of the Summer School, hosted in Bologna. During the years, the summer school has more and more rooted itself in the life of the cities, and in particular through the cooperation with the Fondazione Gramsci, and starting from this year with the Foundation of Urban Innovation, we have organized also a series of public events open to the city, so that the connection between the classes and the participation of the international students can interact more directly with the city. There are several other partners in this project, in particular the municipality of Bologna, the Anche and other partners. So I want to thank all the people that have contributed to this project and organization of this edition. This year, the summer school will discuss and approach topic that we have defined as planetary urbanscapes. So the idea is to revisit early 21st century urban landscapes in light of major shift and transformation that are investing the contemporary moment. The idea is that today cities are not only a distinctive type of settlement, but a complex of translocality, a junction of multiple spatialities, and a space of experimentation of new forms of governance, power relations, but also structures where alternatives to the contemporary situation can emerge. So we look at cities both as the space where neoliberal logics become more evident, embodied in the daily life of human beings, but also the site of possible resistance to these same logics, and spaces for the imagination of different forms of life. That's the reason why we are particularly happy and honored to open this edition of the summer school with Saskia Sassen, professor of sociology at Columbia University and at the London School of Economics. She does not deserve a long presentation introduction. Just I want to mention the fact that for all those people in the last 30 years, her research has shaped our understanding of the radical transformation of global politics and global economy, and with a peculiar attention on the role of cities in this process of transformation in works such as losing control, territorial authority and rights, and of course what is now classics global cities. But at the same time, this attention on an analysis of this transformation had always been accompanied by a peculiar attention to human and social effects of this transformation, and with a particular attention for those categories of people that are mostly affected, such as migrants or aliens, who are those, to quote one of another of his books, that are most exposed to the brutality and complexity of global economy. Tonight, she will give us a talk on the rise of predatory information, a topic which is strictly connected with all his research trajectories. So I ask Saskia to come here. Thank you again for being with us.
It's a great pleasure for me to be here. I thank those who invited me. I'm delighted to see all of you here. I don't expect to get to know you all, but it's nice. It's a nice vista. And I always love coming to Italy. Italy has very special knowledge, traditions. My family lived in Italy for about 15 years. So I do understand a bit the Italian. L'italiano lo parlo un po', si vede con un accento argentino, ma credo che si mi entiende. Eso fue castellano, sì. Per clarificare la cosa. I'm going to speak in English, though my natural inclination would be actually to try my Italian on you, but you're lucky that I'm not allowed to do that. What I want to talk about are sort of a couple of issues. One of them is how do we begin to construct categories of analysis that allow us to understand some of the emergent conditions. And what I'm thinking of is that our old categories still serve us well, but we need something else as well. Why? Because some of these silos, these knowledge silos, are breaking apart. There is bleeding, transversal bleeding. How do we then begin to invent a language that allows us to capture a moment of decay when it comes to the existing categories of analysis, which were developed like 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So I use the term decay so as to make sure that you understand that I'm talking about something that is not necessarily a positive, but a negative. But we need to develop
other languages, we need a few other categories for analysis, etc., etc. We can work with what we have, but it is sort of bleeding transversely. So how do we begin to think about our current condition by bringing in this transversality rather than the specialized knowledge silos? That is sort of one way of putting it. One way of naming what I do is to say that this is a zone, and I love this language, before method. Not in the zone of method, but before method. I have to turn around because, you know, I can see from there, right? So, and other elements that we can use, the fuzzy edges of paradigmatic knowledge, not the heart of the paradigm, which is still strong and it sort of has its own edifice and its own walls that protect it, but actually the fuzzy edges of the paradigm, where the paradigm isn't quite so strong, where it's weak, but it's open also to other elements moving in, so to say. One language that I like to use is the language of analytic tactics, or a tactical analytics. Since English is not my main language, I never know what sounds better from those two, but I like both. And so maybe some of you Brits who are from English here, you can tell me afterwards what is the better language. Now here are some of these analytic tactics. One is, as I already said, in a way the need to actively destabilize meanings that are now stable. When we speak about the city, the middle classes, the whatever, all of these, it seems to me, certainly in the global north, I don't know about the global south, but it seems to me that certainly in sort of global north, they're a bit unstable. They don't quite capture what they used to capture. Second element here, in the shadows of powerful explanation. A powerful explanation is like a light that blinds you. You can't see it. So powerful, oh my God, you can't see it. So there, in the shadows, the weak zones where you can see, you see a fragment, but you can see something. And so I'm interested in that zone. You know, the edges, if you want, of the paradigm. Now, a category that for me always has been very, very important, very useful, very compelling, and I don't know why, but there it is the territorial, the materiality of the territorial, and the multiple materialities that we have invented, we have constructed, we have made about the territorial. And I like the language of the territorial rather than the territory. So I'm trying to extricate the category territory from the homes that it has. Our world is full of homes for territories, all these countries. That is one way of thinking. So how do we exit that? That's such a dominant image that the challenge is, how can I think the territorial, but not the territorial as national sovereign territory, something else, something that exists also outside. And so one way, for instance, in which I like to think about this stuff is I would argue that the financial system as a material condition, a lot of buildings, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of capacity to install itself wherever it wants or needs to be. That is an interesting territory. So all these major financial centers across the world actually have constituted a partial territory that moves across many so-called, barriers or whatever from country to country. And it's very narrow. It's just part. And by the way, as a footnote, though I will return to this, to me it seems emblematic. This is emblematic of how the territorial is functioning for powerful actors. It could be high finance, but it could also be other mining operations, land grabbing operations, all of that. it creates particular territorialities. Some are quite negative, actually. And so the territorial has become a tool for a diversity of powerful actors who know what they want out of it. The average citizen is sort of left, where am I? Because it's not their project, it's something else. So we are sort of left, we are the remainders, almost exaggerated, really. This has nothing of remainder, you know. But we, in a way, the territorial is being grabbed for particular functions in particular ways. It's very partial, it's not national sovereign territory. We, the citizens, are told about national sovereign territory. But when you begin to ask, where is our territory? I don't know. I look at our major cities, they're dominated by enormously powerful actors, high finance, big corporations, luxury this and luxury that, etc., etc. So a whole range of elements. The question of expulsions. I've used that term, and it's a title of one of my books. I've used that term to get at something that happens inside a system. Not expulsion as an irregular migrant is expelled. No, no. Inside. Expulsions. Proper families, so to say, who have lived in a country for centuries or whatever, expelled. There's a lot of expelling that is happening. That has nothing to do with interstate borders. It has to do with how the territorial condition is managed, is developed, is regulated. We have to be on alert for that. All kinds of models that you know from the modern middle class are losing ground. They can no longer be in the urban territories where they used to live. They're out, gone, replaced by something else that has more power. So when we think about the territorial, I think what matters is not so much the whole concept of sovereign territory, as rather who are the core actors who are recomposing, redefining the territory. I think the time will come, and I sense it's certainly in a place like the United States, the time will come when we have to recover the territorial, but not as a national state sort of thingy, but as the right to inhabit, to make, to construct what we want. And it's sort of difficult to think about that, but I see, you know, okay, I go digging and I find all kinds of little elements, you know, that signal, the transformation that we haven't quite, I think, taken in or understood. Now, finally, the making of it all. And by that I mean, it's a particular vector for analyzing, where rather than sort of looking at it, the condition, you actually try to understand what are the constitutive elements. How come it happened? What was necessary for that X, that Y, to arise, to exist? Ha scritto che mi capisce che quelli che sono italiani mi capite come parlo questo inglese mio che ha con un accento un po' strano, si capisce? Ok, molto bene, grazie. Io preferirei parlarvi in italiano, devo dire. So, intermediation. I think that one of the core functions or capabilities that is enabling this landscape that I'm describing to you has to do with intermediation. Now, it's actually an English term, okay? It doesn't get used very much generally. But intermediation is what it signals, that it happens in between. And that in between often remains nameless. It doesn't get a name. It doesn't get even recognition. So one of my obsessions has been to sort of begin to understand when I use the lens of intermediation. So intermediate, neither here nor there. am I actually going to see? What can I see? What can I understand? Etc., etc. Now here are a few, I have a lot of trouble reading this. So one instance in its digest formulation is the local city as an extreme intermediate function. When I developed this notion of the global city, I was never thinking of the city in its full materiality. It was a function of power that was emerging. We're going back to the 1980s. So, for me, the global city function is a very partial element, but it is one that allows you to see certain things. And I find that in the current period, it sort of becomes once again rather significant. It has to do with a variety of actors, very significant actors, that require state-of-the-art operational space that has everything they need. Top-level communicative, digital, believe me, it is not in the interstellar, it's fiber optic. High finance doesn't deal with it. That is for us. It breaks down, it's not totally safe or secure. No, we're talking stuff that is underground. Incredible materiality. And I invite you for a minute, because many people never focus on this, I think. I invite you to think, those cables that the financial sector uses, they have to be laid at the bottom of oceans. I mean, it's an extraordinary event. And as they call it, pulling cable. And I have always wanted to have one of my doctoral students write a dissertation about what it meant to build this infrastructure. Incredibly expensive, incredible challenges, incredibly difficult to do. And it serves mostly, not us. This is for very special sectors. It's a whole other world of communication. And finance is, of course, the queen of the domain here. Point 3 here. I insist that the strategic space includes the households of high-level employees. In other words, what I'm trying to say here is that there is a whole operational space which includes the homes of the high level. It's not just the workplace, it's the homes. Those homes have to work like clockwork. Everything has to go exactly. I'm talking about very high level sort of financial and other types that are delivering, that are creating the algorithms, that are delivering all the kind of machinery and forms of knowledge and instruments that we need in this apparatus that I'm trying to capture for you, which, and I love this, needs a territorial moment, space, materiality is part of the story. It's not all digital. And so I'm very interested in recovering those particular aspects. Now, also final point, so there is no such thing as one global city. It's a whole set of cities. And again, it's not a whole city. It's a way of naming it. It's a way of naming these capabilities that I have been describing. It's about power. Now, the irony is that other dimensions also come in. Human rights activists can benefit from it. You have all kinds of other, but at the core of it is something that is a bit, let's say, frightening, not so nice. Now, two key features in today's Western economies, in my take. So, one is the question of intermediation. I don't know if that term is familiar to you, but let me sort of try to describe it very briefly. It's a core function for all the high-level sectors. And it has to do with the fact that all the core high sectors are completely, and this is a point that is never mentioned and that I think is incredibly important, all those high core sectors that are so powerful, so rich, they can do whatever they want, buy the technologies they want. That core sector needs some very basic materialities, stuff. So it's not all there, it's also, and once you begin to look at it that way, you also see the fragilities, the needs, why it needs X, Y, Z, B. It's not just the fantastic instruments that high finance has developed. It's not just the extraordinary digital capabilities that are in play. It's all kinds of other things. And that is, it seems to me, something that we need to recover when we analyze power in our cities today. So, those people, they need, no matter how powerful they are, they need to go to the toilet. They can get constipated and have a very hard time on those toilets. They have to clean their teeth, etc. You get the picture, right? Bring that all in. And you begin to detect the fragilities. You begin to make clear the needs that they have of others to help them with this, to help them with that. You destabilize a category that has become far too powerful, which is power. When we speak about power as a category, no, let's unsettle it. What is it? What is it? Why just look at the effect of power, which is what we do now? No. All those other things. So that top level, whatever, in some big bang, is constipated, cannot shift. That's part of the story. They need the cleaning woman to take care of the vomiting that happened from the babies, or whatever. So, when you begin to actually, what is it that all is in play when we talk about power or the powerful? There is a lot of other stuff. We're going to break it down, bring it down, just that kind of a motion, if you want. Now, that second point there, the financializing of it all, I can read it totally. From brilliant innovations requiring algorithmic math to, did it say potatoes? Potatoes. So again here, algorithmic math is also being used in high finance to deal with potatoes. It's not all just the algorithms. Why? Because that is precisely the power of this algorithmic mathematical practice that we have now, which is that you can extract value from anything. And I swear, as our destruction of the environment advances, cockroaches, whatever it will be served to feed your poor workers or your rich whatever. A lot of the stuff that now we never see. We talk about power, we talk about this or that, we never see it. No. We have to bring all of that stuff in. Okay. Now here I want to start entering this system that I'm trying to describe to you in terms in which it is usually not described. And so here I want to, do I have a mic? So I want to invite you to look at this, let's see if I can, to look at this curve. It starts in 201 with less than 1 trillion, right? And 6 years later, oh, look at that, 62 trillion. And that is just 10% of the total value that high finance achieved if I would have taken all of it. This is just one little portion. Now, as you know, the global GDP of all the countries in the world doesn't even approximate that. I mean, this is an extraordinary figure. And again, there you have only the 10%, right? So the question then becomes, what are the types of instruments that we are developing, which are really achieving valorization? They are completely in a new world. It's a new range of capabilities. Now, whether they are good or bad, they are mostly not so good, I would say. Now here, here a second element. I'm just now putting elements of how the system works, okay? So here's the second one. I don't know if people can see that title. Dark pools in finance. Dark pools, eh? That sounds like, that is not my language. That is the language of the head of the Federal Reserve in the United States, who at one point says, when he tries to share with all the people that he has to talk to, he's accountable to, and he says, we have this, and this is good, and this is that, and then we have dark pools in finance. I mean, dark pools in finance? Language used by the head of the Federal Reserve? Moreover, he was a professor, he was not one of these Trump types. He was an actual professor at Princeton University. I don't know if people can understand how strange that language is. But he said, the truth is, as he talked to all the media, you know, that happens regularly when the head of the Federal Reserve, central bank in the United States, has to address the journalists, etc. And he said, look, we don't know what's happening in those dark pools. Now, he's the head of the financial system, and he doesn't know. And so the question is, how come he doesn't know? And this guy, you know, he was straightforward. He said, look, I don't know, but there are dark pools in finance. We don't know what's happening. And it accounts for more and more of financial operations. Now, I don't know if people get a sense here, but it's absolutely unusual language and an extreme situation. And so he went on to say, you know, these dark pools in finance are basically private networks run by some of the big financial banks, and they get all kinds of bankers, etc., to put their money there. Rather than putting it, say, in the stock market or whatever is the domain of finance that we, the citizens, have access to, can engage with, etc., etc. So it's a whole separate world. And when the head of the Federal Reserve, in other words, the top financial person in the country, I don't know how you say that in Spanish. Do you know? ¿Alguien sabe? ¿Cómo se llama? The head of the, Torna. Anyway, top person, whatever has to do with finance in the country. You have one too in Italy, let me assure you. And then he goes on to say that Europe, see the gray thing is there, can people see this or not? The gray, the short little gray, that's Europe. And so the big dot, and see how it went growing. And the head of the Fed, the Federal Reserve, also said, as I already mentioned, we don't know what's happening, but there are more and more of them, and that's where the money is made. Now, to give an extreme image, and I repeat image, you and I, we can go to the stock market. You know the stock market, come si dice in italiano, stock market? Il mercato, But the big guys, they don't go to the stock market. They go to the dark pools. Now, this is it's like a kind of huge robbery. You know, they're taking the valuable stuff, they grab it. Now, the United States is an extreme case. One elegant way of putting it is to say it's the vanguard, it's la vanguardia. Problematic vanguardia, clearly. I just wanted to give you these elements to signal that, and there is one more item that I want to mention, to signal that we are dealing today. This is a story that really begins after the 2008 crisis that hit also European countries, 2008. That is extremely problematic, and it explains a bit, not completely, the impoverishment also of the middle classes. Because options that the middle classes used to have, this traditional banking and saving, no, that's not what the action is. So these are all, and I'm talking especially about conditions and actors that are not much talked about, that the experts, yes, but not the general public. Oh God, can people see this at all? You can? Oh, great. So now switching to another condition that feeds in a way that is yet another feeder into this modality that I'm trying to describe to you. So here, look at this title, okay? Ratio of household credit. Credit always sounds good, eh? It's debt. Let's be clear. Credit is debt. But credit sounds so good. So I would put debt there so that you get the reality. So, ratio of household credit to personal disposable income. Right? You get that. Now, the most interesting cases here are the ones of Eastern Europe, when Eastern Europe exits the communist domain, etc. So here, I just want you to look. Czech Republic, this is 5 years, okay? These are critical years. This is when they become part of the Western sphere, all the Eastern European countries. So it's important data, everyone. So look at that. The Czech Republic, in 2000, 8.5% household debt. Let's remember that household credit is household debt. Credit is truly a nasty way of describing it. But in Spanish you say also credito, no? Or credito in italiano si dice? Ma è deuda. Credito è deuda. Anche bisogna capire questo, è un linguaggio un po'. So here you have Czech Republic, 2000, very reasonable, 8.5% household debt. The United States, if you can see, it was already at that point over 100%. Everything like two. Do you see this figure or not? Si vede questo qui giù? Lo vedete? Allora vedete. And then 5 years later, look at that, Czech Republic. Hungary is even better, more extreme, was 11.2% in 2000. By 2005, 39%. What happened? You understand what I'm getting at, right? These households, they open up to the West, so to say, or the Western world. And then suddenly the household debt goes like that. Now, at the United States, always proud to keep growing, have 132%. In other words, more than income, far more than income. You understand the relationship, right? Si capisce il rapporto? 100% sarebbe the household money, no? Allora, subire come United States 132 vuol dire che sei proprio sopra. Now, I'm going to pass on. So when I see these figures, this household debt, this is mostly modest household, that I immediately want to know who owns that debt. And I think that's the question we must ask ourselves. Who owns that debt? So I went scrambling. And so here you have some figures. You know, I can't make the total connection, it would take too much time, too much detail. But share of currency foreign direct household credit. So this is part of it, shows you how much they are indebted to foreigners. So I then went and tried to find out who owns that debt. But it turns out that most of the debt of these places that I'm describing to, especially Eastern Europe, is owned by Germanic banks. Germany, Germany and a couple of other places. So that is also interesting. You wish that that debt were owned by a local bank, your neighborhood bank. Because then if you take a loan from your neighborhood bank, the little neighborhood bank can grow a bit, you understand? Si capisce quello che dico? Se una banca piccola locale è una cosa, ma questi non sono locali, questi they extract and they take it, to their headquarters, which are not in the countries where they get the debt from. So it's like, it might as well be robbery. It quasi, non completamente, but it is almost robbery. Take it out, take it out. Now, in short, extractive sectors, like high finance, very extractive sector, can extract even from modest household. Allora, stesso un ogare non molto ricco, se ci sono 1 milione di questi, il sistema finanziario, I'll take it. Molto problematico per questo. Now, qui c'è ancora un'altra modalità, un esempio, perché ci sono tanti esempi, ma questo è un esempio molto importante, credo io. Another example, when modest housing, towers vuol dire grandi palazzi, ma con casi un po' per i poveri o quelli che sono molto modesti, diciamo, quello è il principio qui. Become part, divengono una parte del global finance. Allora questo è un lavoro adesso che io sto facendo dopo 3 anni, ho ricevuto qualche minaccia di morte, ma non è capitato ancora. Allora, qui, questo è troppo complicato. Allora, una cosa che voglio dire è che questa nuova modalità, this new, I don't know what language I'm speaking, you know this new mode of high finance is, number one, in part possible because it is algorithmic mathematics. And the algorithm is an open. So you can just bring in anything. Now, we have 5-year-olds in galerias, in families, who are learning to use algorithms, okay? So the algorithm is many things. It can be very simple because it's open. You build it. The high financial sector is also building it. And they have built a lot of these algorithms. And clearly, some of them are a bit problematic when it comes to a larger population. So, a brilliant innovation, impressive in its brutality, and how abusive it can be. I think I'm going to skip this. This is another innovation that was done where the purpose was basically to gather materialities. How do you do that in a country like the United States? How do you gather materialities, not a derivative, materialities? And why did you want to? Well, the high investment sector at some point tells the financial system, no more derivatives. Derivatives don't buy derivatives. The derivative is for us. Regularly they fail. The high investment circuit doesn't want derivatives. They want asset-backed securities. In the United States, how do you get assets when almost everything is financialized? Modest housing. That is what that was. 50 million contracts were signed in a period of 7 years. 15 million contracts is the battalion of people who go to modest houses, who do not own their house, and they say, signing, you can own your house. No questions asked. You just signed. The total was over 15 million contracts in a period of 7 years. That means you had an army of people who were looking at all those 14.5 million households who didn't own their house. Now, I am Dutch, and I know I don't sound like Dutch, but I'm Dutch. My country is about 16 million people. That's a total population. And almost all of those, I mean literally almost all of those, went broke. It was invisible. It took a few years to happen. So you couldn't see it. In the Netherlands, given the population size, if you said, okay, 16 million house, 16 million people in a household, you're out. You can't pay. You're out. You would have cleared the fucking country. I mean, these modalities, the scale of it is extraordinary. I'm sure that some of you are not following what I'm saying. Qualcuno di voi magari non può capire quello che sto dicendo, poi mi potete fare domande, sì, veramente vuole. Ma queste cose sono molto drammatiche, direi io. Allora, tutte queste sono pérdidas, of families that are modest families. This is the important point also. There were maybe 2 rich ones, but no, the rest was not. Now, this is an instrument that has entered Europe, and it goes on and on, but here it ends at 2 and it goes on and on. So, this is a brilliant instrument, very dangerous. Now the outcome of this, and I now go back to the United States, was a lot of empty, uninhabited land, even though you had 14.5 million houses built. This is in the United States. It's very strange. This stuff is really weird. And what we must recognize and remember is that because all those houses were there built or bought by somebody, etc., because they had been sold to them, a lot of capital was made. There is a complication that basically the notion is that all of those houses did not exist in the financial system as houses. It was a field of materialities. A door, a toilet, a wall, a ceiling, that you could use that element, whatever it was, to produce an asset-backed security, which is what the high investment level wanted. Out of that come these 14.5 million contracts. Now, the guys who invested and then pulled out, they made a pile of money. The families that signed on to have those houses, almost all of them went broke. And that is another element. Millions, I said it already, but I want to say it, millions of households lost their home. And it was an invisible event. We could not see it. Why? Because it stretched over several years. It was many different localities. So you have the drama evolve, and we couldn't see it. I think this is also alarming, that we tend to think that if something major really happens, we will see it. But to do. Now here is something else that I'm going to go very quickly over. Perché io parlo, sono un peligro. So this is something else which I'm also very engaged by, which is sort of a lot of fun actually. This is foreign actors buying properties. In this case, you can see the countries involved. So for instance, just to give you the most dramatic examples, and this is just, by the way, this is just for 1 year. So in that year, 2013-2014, which is when this is really taking off, the New York Metro, there's $55 billion spent, etc. And a lot of that is foreign, and some of it is domestic. But for instance, just to give you a sense, in the UK, the Qatari royals, and I think they're adorable, I have nothing against them, okay? I want to clarify that. Lo de Qatar, que son muy ricos. They now own more property in central London. Central London is a fancy, expensive area, than the Queen of England. Now, I can't help it sort of being a bit, isn't that cute? But clearly it's also, you say, wow. Now, and then if you multiply, etc., you know, it's a big animal. Here is more, etc. I don't want to stay with that. I'm going to skip this. This is very interesting data, but it would take too much to talk about it. And so one sort of ending now. So when the material, see, one of the subjects that runs for me, sort of big, more conceptual, theoretical bit, run through all of this, is the loss of the capacity to be speech, voice, loss of the material. You know, we tend to think, okay, this is what it is. You know, there is no, this is what it is. Today, you don't know. Partly, not in this particular case, but you know, maybe because a lot of the material that we still see as a material also exists as an algorithmic mathematical condition that can be bottled many times in one day. So immaterial has also been transformed into neutral assets, just an asset. And so this is something that is not easy to understand, but this is happening, and not just happening in the United States. So for me, a very important question that I ask myself, it's important for me, I'm saying it is important, is the material losing capacity to be speech? A table is a table, blah, blah. That loss, if you will. Here, this is, I think I'm going to start ending. But here I just want to so this is central London. This is the Thames, the Thames, as we also say, the Thames, the river there, the very, very fancy area. I really never go there. It's chock full of tourists. But the Germans can be very determined. This wonderful journalist said, okay, let's go walk in some of those areas that you're writing about. How could I say no? I have to. So we go, and there is a chock full of tourists. And I hear the tourists say, look at all these beautiful British properties. You know, you can imagine, right? Buildings, etc. I knew from my data that all of those buildings are owned by one Chinese company. Now, to me, the interesting thing is how the material loses capacity to be speech. Because they look British, or I mean, they're in situ, you know. No, it's not enough. There was a time when the material told you the thing it was. In this case, and in some of the other cases that I mentioned, that's just not the case. Now, these top 100s, I mean, this stuff of the buying of property, it's become a major issue. So I'm just putting this on the map here. So the top 100 cities by property investment. In other words, if you just look at where are the big firms investing, buying urban properties, that is what we have. So the top 100 cities by property investment account for, representan, son, 10% of the world's population, una parte chiquita, 30% of the world's GDP, 76% of property investment. Now, property investment means not all buildings. It means a certain kind of building that has been brought into these kinds of financialized sectors. So it's a little part of it. But it's quite alarming for those of you who are still with me and are still following what I'm saying. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. Now, worldwide real estate assets. That means not all houses, okay? That means, I don't know if this building, for instance, is in that measure. That means buildings that are sort of part of the operational field. We can buy, sell, buy, sell. I'm sure that this is not in that sense. So worldwide real estate assets are nearly 60% of value of all global assets. That's unbelievable. Remember that there are all these other things. There's mining, there is many other things. Buildings have become that significant. The value is 217 trillion. You understand that's much more than global GDP of all the countries in the world. Now that's just a little bit of all the housing. That's the housing that has been financialized, that has been brought into these circuits, where you have a lot of buy-sell also going on. You can see this now, but this is London properties, 60,000 plus buildings, bought by overseas companies, and we don't know who they are. They don't have a name. That's a lot of buildings. This is just the greater London area, 60,000. Many of them are empty. We don't know who owns them. There is no name. Now, I'm sure that this is also happening in your country. I know because I spoke to people in Milan, etc. This is just stuff that is happening. In many ways, it's been happening for a very long time. But this is like has a new modality to it, because the financializing of housing has transformed it. It's a different story. It's not just a building. It's the financializing of just about anything. And what we have in Manhattan, anybody has been there recently, we have these fancy luxury towers that are basically empty. Here are a few. This is another one. Oh, okay. And the few people who are living in there, they feel so alone that they're moving out. And so the question then is, who are the owners, whatever, of those towers, losing money? And the answer is not necessarily. Why? Because an empty luxury building can function as an asset. Can be bought, sold across the world many times. An empty tower is actually easier than a tower with people in it who are complaining this broke down and blah, blah, blah. I mean, that is truly an area. Now, Manhattan, this is probably exhibit number 1. Manhattan has 3 of these towers. They're huge, they're new, they're empty. And again, the question is this a total loss for the owners? Not necessarily. You know what? It might actually be so much easier to use that tower by algorithmic mathematics as an asset and not to have to deal with people. We see the building, the action. It's not a building, it's a field of materiality. And that is one of the differences. And that is what, this new mode, that algorithmic math, right, that when you walk into Goldman Sachs, where there used to be 100 secretaries, now it's 100 physicists. And I'm not blaming the physicists. That it's a completely different mode than, the sort of the old mode. What is next? I don't know. But, so, yeah, I'm going to skip all of this. Where are we at? One way. Where are we really at? With some, these are, what I want to emphasize, these are extreme conditions that I've brought about. This is happening. I know in Milan it's happening. I know that. I have the evidence that I can talk about it. But so in major cities, we have expulsions, if you want, dressed in the clothing of upgrading and modernization. Now that's a familiar thing, right? In other words, a building that was very modest, where you had low-income people living, it gets sort of, made more beautiful and you make more money. So it can be that, it just is a massive loss of habitat. But what we do then know is that, and what we're seeing in many of our countries, is a massive loss of habitat for modest households in the global north. Now, in rural areas, we have other phenomena. I'm not going to talk about that, but I've been writing quite a bit about that for those of you who are interested. Because, you know, basically, rural areas in Africa, parts of Asia, South America, that are being invaded by all kinds of huge corporations that are just extracting. So that's a whole other story. Okay, yeah. So, wrapping up, at its most extreme, we're seeing the emergence of two dominant formats when it comes to the urban. Now let me add, Europe is totally different from the rest of the world, and anyone who has traveled a bit in Latin America and Asia knows how different Europe is, right? So this doesn't quite hold for Europe as much as it holds for most of the world. So at its most extreme, we see two rising urban formats. This is one. So this is la periferia, as we say in Latin America, all little houses, some good, some bad, and then in the back, you know, the high-rise buildings. I should say, because I'm always asked that there is no place in the world where you can stand and see this. This is a photographer who juxtaposed two different images, okay? Entienden lo que dico, certo? Se capisci quello che dico, no? Questo non è una visualità che la puoi vedere così come la rappresento qui. Questa è una juxtaposition di un fotografo. And of course, when there's no land, we build the housing on water. This bimodal development that we have of luxury, a lot of high-end, then a lot of poverty across the world, increases the distance between poor and rich. The large, not quite manageable city contains within it today's frontier. I want to end with this notion. For me, the frontier is no longer at the edges of empire as it used to be. The frontier is, above all, in our major cities. Again, Europe is so different, so much more civilized and reasonable than the rest of the world. But Latin America, North America, a lot, Asia, of course. So the frontier, if you think of the frontier as a space where actors from different worlds have an encounter for which there are no established rules of engagement. That is the frontier. Cioè la frontiera è lo spazio dove attori di mondi diversi hanno un incontro per il quale non ci sono delle regole di gioco, regole del juego. So a very special space. Now, our big cities, New York, I don't mean in Manhattan, but in New York, Los Angeles, we have that frontier. We have that space that is an encounter for which there are no established rules of engagement. This is a modality. And Europe, again, Europe is different, but most of the world is going in this direction. For bad, not for good. So in that sense, the large city has a frontier inside of it. Partly because the frontier no longer exists in empty spaces. They're all owned by foreign corporations, by, you know, whatever. So now, I still want to recover this notion that the city is a space where those without power can get to make a history. Because no matter how rich a city might be, you're going to also have low-income areas, and they can make a little local economy, you know, etc. They can. So the city is today, in today's world, again, Pace Europe, totally different. But in today's world, the city is one of the few places where those without power can actually construct a life, make a business, etc., etc. They can't do it in the field. They can do it in the suburb. It's out. It's the big which is one of the spaces where that is a possibility. I end with this image, and it is this notion of the capacity of the city and urban condition to make us all, poor or rich, into urban subjects. We are urban subjects, the sujeto urbano, no? We're urban subjects just for a while. We're not permanently, even if we live in a city, we're not permanently urban subjects. But this notion of the urban subject who can have an encounter with somebody whom they don't know, it's fine, that is life. Right? You don't have to know whom you run into. You mostly don't. You know, that notion of the urban subject, which is always a temporary condition. You're not the whole day an urban subject. There's this possibility that the city allows us to be an urban subject. And that is what counts. Whether you are the head of a firm or the cleaning woman, you are in the whole, traffic zone, etc. You belong to the city, you are the city, etc., etc. That to me is very interesting. That is something that I don't want cities to give up. I think it's extraordinarily important that the city is a space where the richest and the poorest can have an encounter for which there are not necessarily rules of engagement. So it can happen, that encounter. And so finishing, there are moments in the daily routines of the city when we are all urban subjects. When the city can hack, you know the term hack, eh? Hack means unsettling the original meaning. Hacking in castellano non sé come, in italiano come si dice hacking, che vuol dire that you unsettle the original meaning. That is what hacking means. Hacking didn't mean destroy. It meant an unsettling. That's how the term emerges. So I love that term. So when the city, urban space itself, can unsettle the many different subjects that each one of us is, and make us for a moment into an urban subject. I leave you with that thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Saskia, for this extremely stimulating talk. We have half an hour for collective discussion, so give the opportunity for more people to intervene in the debate. So I ask you for a short intervention, and then would prefer to ask them to collect some of them and then answer, or one by one. So then. Yes, and then we can make a translation. So you can ask in English or in Italian, and so feel free to do it. There is a mic circulating, so if there is any of you who want to.
Potrei chiedere in italiano, però sono americano. So I'm going to ask you in English. It seems to me that you've hit on a really interesting space that's related to contemporary politics of sovereignism or nationalism, neo-fascism, which is that it seems to me there's a weirdly paradoxical relationship between the presence of a lot of borders that block common people and a kind of immateriality that privileges the extractive structures. But at the same time, you talk about the need for the material to have its own voice, which weirdly is not dissimilar from a sort of sovereignist or fascist claim to speak from something sort of deeply material. So, and so we can see maybe a connection to that anger there, of the quote modest person who wants to speak against it. So I guess I want to ask you to speak into that space about giving voice to the material of the modest home, the modest life. Those of us who can see the stock market, but we cannot participate in the dark pools of finance. Those of us who don't like the borders and as an American, the concentration camps we're building there right now, or the seas in which we let people die, if we're speaking from Italiani. Can you speak to that? It's a messy question, but I appreciate if you could speak to that.
Well, I mean, you know, I just talked about a few elements that constitute our current modernity. You added a few other elements. I also work on the migration question, and we can't call what's happening on our southern border migration, and that is something that is unbelievable. You know what I'm talking about, right? All these children that are, I mean, they're just literally piled up and on a, it's unbelievable. But I think that, number one, our culture, I don't know about other cultures, but our culture, the United States culture, has long had a capacity for extraordinarily brutal, and sort of brutal in the sense, not daily brutality, that's everywhere, but when they went against the Japanese, you know, I mean, you look at it, every time there's something that has to be taken care of, you know. I think the United States just is a slightly different concept than, say, the Netherlands. You know, the Netherlands, they also do some bad stuff, right? But, and certainly they've done it historically abroad. But there is something, I don't understand the United States. I'm very happy there. I confess, you know, I feel freedom, the universities are the best part. I don't understand what's happening. But right now what's happening is that the middle classes are going hungry. We just got a whole data set on this. Is that necessary when we have that much wealth at the top? It's just unbelievable. Children who have the one meal that they can have, this is the United States, is school breakfast. And the system wants to eliminate school. I mean, this is utterly, you cannot believe that this is happening in a rich country where we throw away so much food. You know, that's another stuff. So, you know, so my reading, I know that I've deviated a bit from Europe, but my reading of our current moment is that what we are witnessing, in a way, and I'm talking about the United States now, but it's also happening in Brazil and it's happening, you know, in other parts of the world now. What we're witnessing is a decaying system. My reading, I've written about this, and everybody agrees with me, my reading is that in the 1980s, when the United States privatizes, deregulates, and globalizes, really the global condition really becomes a critical one. At that moment, we started a whole new phase. And we never gave a name to that phase. We no longer are the United States that was there up till the 1980s. When it was sort of a reasonable, you know, it was something else. That's also the moment, 1980s, when algorithmic math, finance becomes algorithmic math, which means anything can be made into an asset. Pretty soon our bodies will be used. We won't know it, but they might use our bodies as an asset because it's stuff, right? I mean, this stuff, and, you know, and most people, most economists, I mean, I teach at a very distinguished university, Columbia University. Most economists are just doing microeconomics. They never look at algorithms or math, forget about that. I mean, you know, what they do is very complex stuff, but it's not the real world. So, you know, I have a hard time answering your question, but I hope that this begins to get there. You know, that it's a lot of elements. I just talked about a few very extreme ones and sites of power, but there is a lot of other stuff that's happening. I can tell that this is one of my talks that the audience had a bit of trouble with, because usually I have 500 questions or so, but I felt the very strong need to to share this type of analysis with you. I think we need to be aware, and Europe, as I keep saying, is a bit more protected. But these are systems that are truly dangerous, very powerful, and they don't announce themselves. You know, so one of the subjects that I've been involved with has to do with housing. So we tracked a huge financier who has bought up big low-income housing complexes in 17 countries, and he's throwing out the people who are in it. Do you follow what I'm saying? This is just amazing. This stuff is absolutely unbelievable. And then they fix it all up, and it goes for the not high income, but good income, middle classes. So we have created this way massive amounts of people who don't have housing anymore. These were modest middle class people. So, you know, when you are in the United States and you look at, I mean, mostly if you go there, you wouldn't notice all of this stuff. But it's quite extraordinary the amount of expulsions of various sorts that is happening. And I do think that in Latin America we're beginning to see the same thing, and in certain parts of Africa also. And I am afraid that Europe will also get more involved with this kind of stuff, you know, which is not good. Anyhow, any other questions? Yes.
Hi. You know, going to the mic? Yes. So good.
Just tell me the question, I just have to think about it.
I thought you sounded really interesting about reproductive household, and you were talking a little bit about sort of the clockwork of what it takes behind the scenes, the intensification of the reproductive labor, the household, the unseen workers, these sort of things. And I wonder if you could just elaborate a little on the intensification with the financialization, say from the 80s, for example, to now, because I think that's important.
Yeah, so I've written quite a bit about that. I'm sort of happy to send to you. So when we, sort of the expert mode is if you deal with finance, you deal with finance. You know that mode, right? And so I'm always interested, what are all the, if you want, infrastructure that supports the thing that is the outcome, if you want, right? And so I have talked about, I've written in my work also about the diversity of workers that are involved in very high finance sectors. Now the household. So the household, the argument that I made was that the household should be seen, the household where these high-end workers should be seen as part of the operational space of what we just see as a financial building or some other corporate. It doesn't just have to be finance, right? And once you enter the household, that means clockwork. It also meant, I was part of it, that we could organize. We could organize around Park Avenue, that kind of thing in Europe. We could organize the cleaners who were working in those kinds of situations. In other words, households where you had people who are involved in top-level sectors, and it's not just finance, it also is the tech sector and all kinds of other things. Whereas organizing in the suburbs, where you have modest middle classes or not so modest middle classes, much more difficult. So it told us something about what are the conditions that enable to organize. And one of it's almost like an irony that the high-end sectors, because everything has to work like clockwork, that is a place where you can actually organize. Those women who are, I don't know all of those women, but we got to know some of them, who sort of use Park Avenue basically, they are aware that they are needed, and they can set terms to some extent. It's better than working in a nice middle-class suburban home, where you are, you just don't have the standing that you can have in that other situation. Yeah?
All right.
Joe?
But changing scale between global and local problems, and naturally it's way, any jackets can knock down a barn, but you need a good carpenter to build one, so of course it's way easier to make things badly than to make it bad for everyone than to make it good. Do you know the data that you gathered? Have you seen any hints for possible solutions, possible ways of using the infrastructure that has been already built in the system to turn it around or to create a better system?
Well, my effort, and it could also have a multiplier effect in a sense, right now that I have been very interested in, I mean, it started when I was at the University of Chicago, where a bunch of my students were very, very concerned with that, is to grow whatever we can grow locally, you know what I mean? Including the fact that now you can have a chicken in your house, not that I could, but anyhow, with a, you know, chicken lays eggs every day. I don't know how they do that, but it's fantastic. But how do you actually move the survival function into household situations rather than always having to go buy a shop? That's one point. Second point, how to get rid of franchises. The franchise. So if I need to buy a computer, I need a franchise. If I want to have a cup of coffee, do I have to go to a franchise? No. It should be a neighborhood operation. Why am I against the franchises? Because the franchise means that part of the consumption capacity of the locality leaves the locality. We need to begin to recover a more circular situation where, you know, so you buy from that local blah blah, that local shop can grow more, then, you know, etc., etc. That is how it used to be. And now, franchises are everywhere. And even for the most sort of local, like a cup of coffee. And so that is sort of one of the efforts that, did I answer your question this way or not? That is one element. Yeah? So to me the relocalizing, also we have to do it just for the environmental thing, etc., etc. We need what they have in many European countries. Every household can have a plot of land where they can grow. In Manhattan, it's almost inconceivable that we could do that. But outside Manhattan, in New York City, yes, we could. Same thing in Chicago. This all started for me in Chicago. Chicago is a bit different city from New York. But, did I answer your question? Sort of?
Yeah, more or less. I'm just wondering, is there any goodness in the global exchange of information, for example?
Well, I think that is a very good point. I think that is beginning to happen. You know that there is connective tissue emerging, and it comes out of activisms, that's very important. It comes out of almost obsessions with certain issues like the environmental question, the this, the that, you know. I think it's very important that people find their object, right? And it's a very long list. But if you can begin to mobilize around, not everything, because then you're lost, but a particular obsession, let's say, is one way of putting it, right? If you have many different, and a city is a location, then for those people actually to begin to connect with each other, etc., etc. And that is something that I'm very interested in enabling. And I must say, it started in Chicago. I was at the University of Chicago, which is a very, very special place, and the students are absolutely, I mean, it's like another world. And for them, it was an adventure, because they were so absolutely in the library the whole time. Totally. I mean, the University of Chicago is like, it belongs to another era. They say it's the last real German university in the world. The Germans don't have that anymore. So it was like, these kids, they went out on the street, and the whole things began to happen. It was absolutely beautiful. And now, I try to do it at Columbia University, but I must say it's much more difficult to do in Manhattan than it was in Chicago, especially where the University of Chicago was. Anyhow, yeah. Yes?
Thank you, Saskia. I was just wondering, you mentioned two tensions that are different here, that is being created within cities, and also the possibility of the urban. So I wanted you to delve more in these tension and if you have identified some material.
Decime en español que estás, vos sos italiano,
Colombiano.
colombiano, ahí va.
Ok, sobre la tensión que hay entre la frontera que se está creando entre las ciudades y la posibilidad de ser ese sujeto urbano que se está dando. Si has visto en esa tensión como algunos lugares que has explorado como materiales, o sea, lugares físicos donde esa interacción pueda estar pasando, esas tensiones se puedan como se puedan dar.
Okay, so let me backtrack just one little step. And so I think that, so the city, as I mentioned already, this is my take. You don't have to agree with that. My take is that the city is the site, the only site we have left where there is a frontier. The frontier is no longer at the edges of empire. The frontier is deep inside our cities. Why? Because almost everything is urbanized, and what is not urbanized is big plantations, is mining, it's controlled by the 18 bottlers, you know, the water things, they grab water. So when you really look at it, our major cities that cannot be fully controlled, that cannot be fully managed, they contain today's frontier. What's the frontier? The frontier is the space that enables, or that is de facto, and produces an encounter between actors from different worlds for whom there is no set of rules of engagement. You're on your own. The cities like that. The cities have spaces like that. Now, maybe your city is so perfectly beautiful, etc., maybe it doesn't matter. But any major city which is a bit messy, a bit whatever, has that. And that is what I want to valorize. Valorize? I want to valorize this notion that the frontier is not gone. The frontier is there, but it's a very different frontier because it forces an encounter and it gives voice, I think, to those who didn't have much voice. So the city makes that possible. A plantation and a mining operation do no longer function that way. There was a time in the 1800s when it was the plantation economies and it was the mining that enabled workers to organize. That's finished. They're all militarized now, literally militarized. So it's in our big messy cities, a very neat, perfect city? No. Our big messy cities, which are spaces that cannot be fully controlled. And that's, I think, very important. We can talk about it a bit more afterwards, okay? Because I think you might have had other items there in mind. All right, are we ready for a drink? Oh, okay, fine. Yeah. I'm ready. No, of course, yes.
I'll be fast.
No, I'm sorry.
I just, particularly for a climate, I was curious about the choice to stress an analysis of nationalism and localism over class analysis. Just trying to constant return to, and localism, but in particular the emphasis on the national over a transnational class analysis. Like, why do we care about guitarism?
Are you saying that I was bringing in the nationalism?
Yes.
I don't think so, because the high financial sector only exists in its thriving mode because it has multiple insertions all over, and there is a lot, that's one thing. Secondly, big cities are sites where you have multiple cultures, immigrants, etc., but also other cultures, many cultures. So I don't think, maybe I'm
There's a
missing.
lot of emphasis on the national identity of who owns what, who's bought what. And
No, but the national identity? I didn't talk about national identity.
maybe I didn't think this wrong, but right, how many Chinese own properties, how many Qatari own properties?
Right, but that, as I said, that is an internationalism also. That is not something, I think that's great. But I also think that many people are not ready to register that. to accept that. No, but it's also, I mean, let's be clear, you know, some internationalisms are positive for everybody involved, others are negative. I mean, the United States, well, there are like 30 rich countries that have major acquisitions in Africa, South America, you know, the plantations, the water, etc., etc. That's not positive. That isn't internationalism, but that's not positive. So, you know, it varies. I mean, there are many different ways in which this international dimension is executed or what it's after. But having a lot of immigrants in a city, I think, is a good thing, you know. Maybe I didn't understand what you said.
Maybe I didn't understand what you said. I understood you to be talking about the national, the emphasis wasn't on a transnational capitalist investment and how this is a different moment from previous, because this, of course, is a modern period, right, of this kind of transnational moment. So.
Well, when I talked about high finance, you know, I talked about how it is constituted in the United States, but that was partly because, I mean, if you bring in differences in you know, it was just, but it's totally interlinked. I mean, the Americans would have trouble, the American financial firms need firms in other parts of the world too. So, you know, high finance is pretty international, actually.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know what.
I wanted to ask you to maybe make concrete. You spoke a bit about how Europe is protected in certain ways as compared to the United States with regards to these internal frontiers that you extrapolated on. So I would just ask why exactly this is, in your opinion, why the United States has become this giant monster, and also how Europe is more protected than the United States in this way.
Right, but it's not that Europe is more protected, it's that Europe has deep histories that led, for example, to make small cities be very significant actors. You know, those are long, old histories. So you have, in a country like Germany, in a country like France, you have many small cities who are very manageable conditions. You know, the average, even if you're a bit poor, it's a reasonable life. Europe has made sure in many countries that people can have their own sort of vegetable growing spaces. You know, often they have to travel a bit outside the city. Sometimes it is, you know, it depends how big the city is. So I just think that the urbanism that Europe developed was a bit more reasonable than the urbanism that we saw in the United States. Now, I would argue that the old cities in the United States, like Chicago, like New York, and you know, a few other cities, they were far more like the European cities, you know, in the past. But then they sort of, I mean, Manhattan is a part of New York, right? But Manhattan is a totally transformed space nowadays. And the big investment sector, which is hundreds and hundreds of small firms, some specialize in Mongolian accounting, others specialize, you know, we have it all there. That is like this huge operation that can deal with any country in the world, that has installed itself in Manhattan and in parts of New York City beyond Manhattan, that has just expelled all kinds of other operations that were there, you know, like smaller and modest firms, housing, etc., etc. And so what you see in a city like New York is a kind of degrading of the concept of city, whereas in the late 1970s and early 1980s, when New York City was broke, officially broke, it was a great space. You had artists from all over the world, I became a performance artist. Although during the day I was a professor, you know, I was a junior prof. I never slept, basically. But it was artists from all over the world felt that in Lower Manhattan they had a space where they could crash. You know, that is simply gone. It just, now it's all is sort of corporate. Not all of it, I exaggerate, but there is a lot of it. So that transformation, I think, is a real loss. It's a loss of urbanity. Even though you have more Harris buildings, that doesn't mean that it is urbanity. So am I getting at your, yeah. So Manhattan today is totally different from that other Manhattan. I mean, it's quite interesting to think that when a city is broke, that it means that, I mean, Berlin went through the same thing. Berlin used to be a space where the artists wanted to be because you could just crash anywhere. Well, that's finished too. Now it's, you know, everything is very formal, very built, and very expensive. So these are, to me, losses. You know, a city should be a highly mixed environment, where you also have very modest housing, you have, you know, that is urbanity. Urbanity is that you never know who you're going to run into, you know, in a place. I don't know, it sort of seems like that, so I miss that a bit. Not that I have much time to do my urbanity bit, but still.
Okay.
Yes.
You spoke about how this, we can say this, ida capitalista, as the Zapatistas say, basically it's like an octopus owning parts of the city, building infrastructures and not just, as you said, non-material assets. And it controls clockworkingly our lives as well. Like it makes our lives like have to be running clockworking. You know, maybe I use the term that is not English, but forgive me. My question is very naive. Sorry about that, but it's it seems to me, I don't know if you agree with that. So forms of resistance through urban commons and you know, those forms of basically it's taking spaces away from this areas of the city that are controlled by capitalist relationships, whether local capitalism or transnational ones. But I speak from my experience, and I think the experience of a lot of people here, it takes a lot of freaking time to do that, because you have to take care of either a space or other forms of commons, material or non-material ones. But our lives are controlled by, at least mine is, controlled by capitalism, which doesn't allow you to have much time, and that time that you have left, it's still needed to survive, maybe do reproductive forms of work that, if you're a woman, you have to do sometimes. Unfortunately, it's just, you have to do it, and you don't have time to do anything else because, well, you know that. So the question is, which is very meaningfully said, how do you get out of this?
I mean, look, I don't have the answers, you know, because everything is a bit different. But I think that when we begin to relocalize, you know, if we want to relocalize the coffee, do I really need a multinational corporation like Starbucks to have a cup of coffee in my fucking neighborhood? No, I don't, right? So, what do we do? You know, and really, there are parts in New York City where people are really beginning to organize that way. Partly because a lot of people are impoverished. You know, this is everything is totally expensive. So it's an interesting moment actually when you begin to see a willingness. Co-ops. A co-op has been set up in New York. You know, that is working rather well, etc. So the problem is that New York City is huge. It's not just Manhattan, right? And I think I've been doing some research with Latino neighborhoods, and they are much better at this, you know, than the non-Latinos. Let's put it that way. They really begin to set up their own shops. They have cooking arrangements, etc. And I think that's good, you know. I mean, especially because everybody's feeling a bit poorer. I mean, but I don't know what's happening in Italy with prices, but you know, the cost of living has just escalated incredibly, and we now have more and more people are hungry. They can't afford to buy food that you can eat 3 times a day. I mean, this is Manhattan. This is unbelievable. And these are sort of, it's difficult to track this, it's difficult to know about this. But schools are beginning to pick up on it, right? Because they know that the kids arrive super hungry and they need some food at school. And I mean, it really is a very dramatic situation, you know? It's like there are 2 halves. There's one half that's doing so incredibly well. They're richer than they ever thought. And you're not talking super rich, you know, we're talking really nice rich, so to say. And then there is a growing population. This isn't just New York City I'm talking about. It is happening in LA, it's happening in other parts. We have more and more homeless people. Go check out visuals, you know, online for Los Angeles and for New York City. We have a lot of homeless people. And that's men and women, young and old. It's just unbelievable. So we are moving backwards. The system, to me, my reading, the system that takes off in the 1980s, privatization, deregulation, and globalization in quotation marks, that is a particular mode of globalization, that has really made a difference. Now, New York City has always liked to be in a vanguard, right? They are also in a vanguard with this. Because what's beginning to happen is that other cities are also beginning to find these kinds of conditions. So, and the data are there, by the way. We have a lot of data, for those of you are interested. So, in that sense, when I say Europe is really still doing much better than it really is the case. Yeah? So, are we set? I need a drink. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Saskia. We can continue the discussion tomorrow night with the critical dialogue that Saskia will have with Sandro and Sandra. So the meeting is, for those who are interested, tomorrow night at 8 in the cortile del Pozzo outdoor. So thanks again and see you tomorrow.